back to the 7th session in my series on posthuman transformation. This is a teaser series going chapter by chapter through my book called Posthuman Transformation in Ancient Mediterranean Thought. We've already looked at an introduction in the first 5 chapters. I encourage everybody to go review those if you haven't already. Chapter 6 is our topic today. Chapter 6 is called Origin and the Angelified Jesus. In this chapter, I turn decisively to the Christian sources on angelification. We've seen in the previous chapters a lot of information about daimonification, that is, becoming a daimon in the Greco-Roman world. And the roughly equivalent concept, or at least analogous concept, angel as a mediating being that can be good or evil, is obviously something that the Christians had. Christians couldn't talk about daimonification because for Christians, daimons, or demons if you prefer, are universally bad. But they could talk about becoming more and more angelic. And of course, they had as a biblical basis Luke 20:36, which is a rendition of a phrase in Mark and Matthew, not you shall be as angels, but equal to angels. And this was really important for early Christians, and Origen is a great example of someone who takes this not just as a metaphor, but as an actual reality that people, human beings, that is, believers in Jesus in this case, actually become angels. And this is what I mean by the full angelification. The thesis of the chapter is as follows. Origen imagined Christians through a process of purification by virtue as entering into angelic orders after death, earning angelic or ethereal bodies in a vast process of spiritual evolution until they achieve one spirit union with God. And that is the final end goal of all. The goal is not just to be like God, but to be God. And there's no limit to that. But that takes a great deal of time, and that takes a great deal of energy and transformation. On the way toward being God, there are various stages, many of them through the angelic orders. One doesn't simply become one spirit with the Logos or with God in a single lifetime or in the course of a single lifetime. After one's life here in the fleshly platform, one ascends through the order of angels. And this was important for Origen. Angels were called gods in the scriptures. And so the process of deification is also a process of angelification. And becoming a god means becoming something like an angelic being on one's way to full union with the one and true, and as Origen would say, only God. For those of you who don't know Origen, a lot can be found online these days, but to give you the basic rundown, Origen is born probably around 185 in the Common Era, and he is classically educated and trained in Alexandria. It seems under Ammonius Saccas, who is a Platonic teacher and very famous one at the time. After, reportedly, Origen's father was executed for professing Christianity, he was raised outside the home and boarded with a woman who was also boarding a popular Valentinian teacher. And Origen remained in this house of a rich lady until he was able to provide for himself. Now, according to tradition, Origen possibly castrated himself, which caused him problems later on when he was ordained as a priest in Palestine. In midlife, he was exiled from Alexandria. The issue of castration was raised, but This was for what was considered to be false doctrine, at least by the bishop of Alexandria, a man by the name of Demetrius. And specifically raised here was the issue of the salvation of the devil, that Origen had taught the salvation of the devil. And although Origen clarified this, he was not allowed to return to Egypt and resume his teaching. Instead, he found himself in Palestine, where he had recently been ordained, and there he remained the rest of his life from about 235 until 251, 52, possibly 53. If we take a look at Origen's story of souls, some of this is contested because Origen's systematic work on first principles doesn't survive in the first three books in Greek, and were dependent upon a Latin translation by a later Orthodox writer called Rufinus. But it seems that from what we can reconstruct, all souls originally were created equally as pure intellects, and these souls were not differentiated. So there were no souls of angels and souls of humans yet, anyway. Souls, however, became satiated and careless or negligent for whatever reason we don't know. And some of these souls grew cold. And since the Greek word for soul is suke and the word for growing cold is sukastai, there was a kind of play on words here. And the souls that grew cold in their love and concentration for God fell into flesh. And some of them fell rather hard, and the souls of demons were the ones that fell the hardest. But this is God's universe, according to Origen. That means that it's rational and it's run according to plan, a plan of providence. Which means here that any souls in the course of long ages can be promoted or demoted. And the system of promotion or demotion occurs according to a rational idea. That is, souls that perform rational or irrational acts, which are moral or immoral acts, respectively, are souls that go in either one of two directions. Either they are promoted to higher orders, or they are demoted to lower orders. And the human soul is a fairly low order on the ladder of being. So human souls have a long way to work up until they are one spirit with the supreme divine intellect. That is, so one of the ways that Origen imagined this is you have a vast ladder of being, as Jacob saw in his famous vision of the ladder in Genesis 28. And on this ladder, angels were ascending and descending, and these angels represent the souls being promoted and demoted as the course of spiritual evolution and devolution ran its course. But let's have a look at some of the actual quotes from Origen so that we can get an idea of the general way of thinking he presented. In his homilies on Luke, he said that those who will be like angels will be angels. And it seems to me that this is on the basis of Luke saying that humans will be equal to angels, or is angeli rather. Anyone, Origen said in another homily, who can follow Christ and ascend to the heights of heaven will not be human, but according to his word be as an angel of God. Now this is interesting to me because a lot of times one will hear that humans and angels belong to the same class of being. And it is true that they belong to the order of created beings. But for Origen, if you graduate out of the human level, you become something different than human. So Origen's thought is not about the perfection of humanity perfecting however our bodies are, whether it be through getting smarter or taller or faster or whatnot. The goal of salvation is to transcend humanity itself. And one does that by becoming an angel, plain and simple. And this is angelification. In another quote, we see this fairly clearly, this one from the selections on the Psalms, which exists from Catenae in the Patrologia Graeca series. Quote, "One must lay aside everything human. It's necessary to be an angel already and a god," unquote. And since angels were called gods in Scripture, Origen can fudge a little bit here, but on the order of being, strictly speaking, you would have humans below, angels above them, and gods even higher up. And the various higher orders of angels have more claim to divinity and thus more claim to the title of God. And all these angels are, of course, under the supreme God, as well as the supreme intellect of God. So they're not threatening God in any way. In Plato's famous image of the chariot in his Phaedrus, we see that there are various trains of souls following their respective deities. So some souls follow Zeus, some souls follow Athena, some Apollo, etc. And it's interesting that Origen says that souls enter into the society of particular angels. He mentions Michael, the chief protector of the redeemed, as well as Raphael, who presides over healing. He also mentions that humans can become thrones, and thrones are one of the higher angelic orders that exists logically around the throne of God, fixed in concentration and praise, and humans can become thrones in the long course of ages, that higher order of angels. So it's clear that Origen was talking about real transformation, real evolution into a different species, in this case an angelic species. And within the angelic class there were higher and lower orders, and everything is done in order. One doesn't skip from being a human to the Archangel Michael. One goes through long lives in long ages and gradually makes one's climb up back from where one fell at first. I've already mentioned the Logos. The Logos for Origen is a created being and is special because of his own decision. All intellects were equal at first, but the Logos gained superiority over all other intellects by remaining fixed and firmly concentrated on God. The love of the Logos never grew cold, so the Logos never fell. He is the firstborn of every creature, also called the angel of great counsel in the Septuagint version of Isaiah 9:6. And this Logos was inseparably joined to the soul of Jesus. And that is why Jesus is an incarnation of the Logos. The souls of Jesus and the Logos are distinct, but they are inseparably united, and they work together. And so Jesus lives according to the Logos. He has the divine and unfallen intellect in himself, and that is why he does not sin. The soul of Jesus, which itself was without sin, much like the soul of Moses, became incarnate in a wondrous body with an exceptional quality, and lived his life, and because it was a human body, was mortal, that is subject to death, died on a cross, but in his resurrection was changed into an ethereal and divine quality. And this ethereal and divine quality is essentially what angels are made of. Angels who course through the stars in the upper heavens and live in the realm of ether, or ether if you prefer. They have ethereal bodies. And it is said that Jesus, on his way up, appeared as an angel. 2 angels. And this is very important because it is a indication that Jesus, for Origin was a forerunner of human spiritual evolution, and that the pattern of Jesus is the pattern of everyone who makes the decision to follow him. And the way to follow him, the way to achieve his course of spiritual evolution, is to make the right moral decisions in this life, to begin that process of graduating out of the flesh. Here, we are not in the realm of the resurrection of this earthly flesh. We are in the realm of attaining a higher substance, which is an angelic substance. And this is why Origen was a supporter of real transformation and real angelification. Now, all this is only the tip of the iceberg. You can read much more about this in my book, Posthuman Transformation in Ancient Mediterranean Thought. Recently came out 2021 from Cambridge University Press. It's now in paperback and affordable, both in paperback and in a Kindle version. So go check that out, surf through the footnotes, and tell me what you think. Leave a comment, leave a like. Really appreciate it. It's always an honor for me to meet you in this space, and I hope you will consider supporting me, getting the book, and maybe hopping on Patreon at the tier where you can dialogue with me and ask questions. Happy to meet you there. Happy to learn about what you're learning about and what you're interested in. I hope these videos are helpful, and I really hope that everyone can use them for their own spiritual and intellectual journey. Till we meet again, take care, everybody.